Radio Voice of Russia will be broadcasting live to you in less than an hour from now. More than 4,000 business leaders, policymakers, economic experts from all across the world have come together to brainstorm ways out of the global economic crisis. Radio Voice of Russia's own studio at the Forum is bringing you updates and exclusive interviews every hour. And live on the phone with us now from our studio in St. Petersburg is Ed Skyler, Citigroup's Executive Vice President for Global Public Affairs. Hello, Mr. Skyler. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, every year, delegates at the Forum talk about how the world has come out of the global financial crisis. Have we really?
Well, we're making progress. We would say that growth is uneven and it's fragile. And it's not uniform if you look at different parts of the world. If you look at the U.S., there seems to be moderate growth, but not spectacular growth. If you look at the Eurozone, you can see that struggling against recessionary patterns. You look at the emerging markets, you could see growth still probably envied by the developed markets, but not as strong as it was. So the world is a very uneven place at the moment.
You know, some critics say that having attracted less interest from investors in the good times, Russia has made fewer headlines in the recent emerging markets turmoil than, let's say, its fellow BRICS partners, Brazil, India, China, South Africa. What would you respond to those critics?
Well, we don't have a view on the criticism. What we were talking today about is how countries like Russia can really engage by investing in their cities. And we sponsored a report by The Economist about how the infrastructure demands and how cities become more and more competitive with time. And St. Petersburg did particularly well in The Economist projections. And it's of note to us because as a city we operate in about 130 cities globally. So we really see cities as a thing more so than countries to be focused on, because more and more that's where growth is going to be generated by. We think that in 2025, the top 100 cities in the world will really be accounting for more than a third of the global growth. So, by measure of GDP. So that's really our perspective that we've been talking about this morning.
How has the European crisis, the global economic crisis, affected the investment climate in Russia, if at all, as opposed to other BRICS and first-tier economies?
Well, we're in an era of globalization. So all these economies, especially if you are positioning yourself as a global financial center, as Moscow is, everything is impacted. So there is nobody is isolated. The shock waves ripple. So clearly Russia feels it. If you just see people's speculation about when quantitative easing will end in the U.S., you can see the impact that had not just in the stock market in the U.S., but in the stock markets around the world. So all these economies are linked. We think that's a trend that's here to stay, and we're, at Citi, we're comfortable with that. We understand that. We've actually shaped our strategy around 3 trends: globalization being one of them, digitization, and urbanization.
Mr. Skyler, I cannot but ask you, as the Deputy Mayor of New York, now what do you make of Moscow and St. Petersburg then? Are they global financial centers, financial hubs in your view? And what is needed in that respect?
Well, clearly, where the report Citi commission that The Economist did saw very promising signs for both Moscow and St. Petersburg. I'll start with St. Petersburg since we're sitting here. One of the things that's very important to the study and to compare in general is access to seaports and waterways, and clearly St. Petersburg scores very well there. But among other factors they looked at is the cultural and social strength of the city, and the cultural heritage. And you can go to the Hermitage or visit other cultural attractions of the city to know that this is St. Petersburg is a world-class city for cultural attractions. If you look at Moscow, Citi's been proud to advise on the project to create and build a global financial center in Moscow. We traveled here in 2011 as part of a delegation to support the government's efforts. And the Economist study we commissioned did show progress in economic and financial strength in Moscow. I believe due to the investments being made by the administration here. So clearly the hard work is paying off.
What would be the advice? Of course, plenty of things need to be done and improved, both in the capital of Russia and in the so-called northern capital in St. Petersburg. As the former deputy mayor of New York, what would be your advice, let's say one line, for Moscow authorities and for the St. Petersburg authorities?
I would not presume to give the authorities here advice, but I'll tell you that the factors that are looked at to make cities competitive are economic strength, financial maturity, and by that I mean strength of the financial markets, the stock market, the central bank, the infrastructure, the bridges, the waterways, the airports, human capital, the strength of the university system, the talent that lives and works in the city, the strengths of the institutions. Can they tax? Are they successful urban plannings? Will they be able to generate the capital required to make the investment to make the city competitive? The cultural and social strength, which we touched on, the sustainability.
Yes, and in the modern realities, also security. This is a very big issue right now, also for Moscow, St. Petersburg, as well as for New York, with police officers accused of exceeding authority there. What do you make of Michael Bloomberg's policies in this regard? Well,
as a former deputy mayor in the administration, I support them unequivocally. Mayor Bloomberg took office in the wake of 9/11, and we needed to devote considerable resources to counterterrorism at a time of dwindling resources. And those investments have paid off. New York has had a very successful record at working with the federal authorities in the U.S. to thwart terrorist attacks. And New York has made the investments necessary. There's a Lower Manhattan Security Initiative that it was inspired by London's Ring of Steel to make sure that the financial center could be protected. There was hardening done to the World Trade Center developments there to make sure that these would not be attractive terrorist targets. So this is the state of the world that we live in. You need to look no far. It is apparent to everybody, and governments obviously need to take action, and many have. And unfortunately, we have sad reminders, like in Boston, not too long ago, about what happens when weapons come into the wrong people's hands, whether it's homegrown or international.
And finally, Mr. Skyler, what are Citigroup's global plans?
Well, Citi is a fundamentally different company than it was during the financial crisis. We've gone back to our core strengths of banking, leveraging our unique footprint in over 100 countries. We're focusing on serving clients, small businesses, governments, throughout our network. We are very focused and developed a strategy that leverages the three trends I mentioned: digitization, urbanization, globalization, and we're doing very well. We have a very strong presence in 130 of the top cities of the world, and we are a very different company than we were several years ago. Our capital strength is unquestionably strong, and we are going to continue to serve our clients globally.
Thank you very much for that insight. It was Ed Skyler, Citigroup's Executive Vice President for Global Public Affairs, live on...
Состоялось вручение премии «Глобальная энергия». Лауреатами этого года стали российский академик Владимир Фортов и японский ученый